Computer. Yeah. Welcome to Faith and Calm. This is class number 155. We are in pre-Shavuos mode, but I think we're going to save our Shavuos class for next week. This week, we're going to talk about something a little bit off topic, but not too far off the topic. Certainly not off the topic of Faith and Calm. I think that this helps a lot with a lot of issues that I have, other people have, struggles that people have, and it was based on a mimer from the Tzemach Tzedek. That's the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he was talking. He has a book called Derech Mitzvosecha, the book about the explanations about the Sefer Tamei Mitzvahs is called, the reasons behind the mitzvahs, and he examines one mitzvah, which we had like 2 weeks ago in Parshas Emor, which says that Kohen, if he to be able to serve in the temple, he has to be without blemish. If he has a blemish, his eyelashes are too long, his body parts are disproportionate, then tough luck, he loses out. And this is a question that I think a lot of people bother them. I mean, why does he lose out? He's allowed to eat the korbanos. Why is he? He didn't do anything bad. He was born that way. God did it to him. So, what's Torah trying to teach us about this? So, and it's not just the lesson about this issue, but it's a lot about issues. A lot of people who feel that they somehow, God made me in a particular way, and I'm losing out. I'm losing out because other people don't have my issues and my problems, physical, mental, psychological, anxiety, medical. They don't have my issues. They don't have my problems. And I lose out. I lose out because of it. And it's not fair. It's just not fair. It's not right. So I'm not going to give you the Sefer Chinuch has its answer, and others for him have their answers, but let's go into the deeper aspect of it, the Kabbalistic, and then we'll see that doesn't make any sense at all, but then we'll try and explain what it really means. So the Zohar says, what does the Zohar say? The Zohar connects this to the story about the creation of the moon and the sun. So as people remember from their Bible, on the fourth day of creation, the God made the moon and the sun. He made the two big lights in the heavens, and the Medrash says, obviously, because we don't see two big lights, we see one big and one small. So it said what happened was the moon said, "Wait a second, it doesn't make any sense. You can't have one kingdom and two people ruling. You can only have one crown, one people in charge. Either he's bigger or I'm bigger. But God, you can't have both." So God said, "You're right. You be the little one." And that's what the Medrash says. And so the moon had to shrink itself. And the moon cried and said, "Why me? I just brought an argument here. I didn't, why should I suffer? Why am I being punished? Why am I losing out?" And God says, "Don't worry, Jews will take the new month from you. The Tzaddikim will be called like a moon." And the moon's just not happy with all
It's true.
It's
The
not
moon gets all the good things.
Yeah, he lost off her thing. So he gets the moon is very upset about this. But God says, "Fine, I consider it a sin. I'll bring a carbon chatas every first of the month for me. It's my fault." So like God is saying, it's my fault, which is even harder to understand, because what did God did something wrong? If God wanted to fix it, he should have just made the moon big again, He has to he's not a human being. He didn't make a mistake. So whose mistake is it? Did he violate his own rules? What are we talking about here? So now we're really confused. Okay. So this is where the Tzemach Tzedek helps us understand the Kabbalah and the mystical side of things. What does the Tzemach Tzedek say? The Tzemach Tzedek says a very interesting thing. And he says that you have to bear with me. We're going to explain a little bit of conceptual, mystical, the spiritual side of things, and that we'll see that how that relates very much to our personal lives. So when God created the world, he first created the whole universe, Obviously, there was no God. There was only God. There was no
only God.
There was no existence. To make existence happen, he went through different stages. And the first stage was that he made various called divine forces, midos they're called, divine energies, chesed, kindness, judgment, gevura, victory, netzach, hod, various other ones. And they, because they are they're the foundation, the pillars of which the spiritual energies of which create the later the existence of the universe. They each had their own definition, an ego associated with them. Chesed said, "I'm kind," and God is kind, and that's really what God is all about, and that's what the whole universe is about doing kindness. And Justice said, Mishpah said, "It's all about doing right. It's not about that." And so to say, they were infinite. And so one says, everything should be infinitely my way, and one says it's infinitely my way. And when you get infinities fighting with each other, it wasn't good. And so the whole basis of the whole what we see in this world today was that there was something called the Shvir Sakelim, the breaking of the vessels, because it just couldn't withhold those infinite lights in containers in particular forms, because one wants to be infinite, the other wants to be infinite. It's no room. This was the source of all of the negativity and the destruction and the problems in this world, called the klipas. There was shells. What? Go ahead. Yes.
Can I ask a question? How did it go from which one of them wanting to be more important than wanting them to be infinite?
Well, they are infinite because they're both it's all godliness. So if God creates it originally, God only can create the infinity, the aspect of things, was because God is infinite. So the creations also share that aspect of infinity. When you have infinities, you don't have finite yet. There was no finite created yet in the world. So these were infinite forces, although they had an aspect of finiteness, because once you can distinguish one thing from another, it's already in a certain sense not as infinite as the Ein Sof was the infinite one himself. But they had infinite kindness, infinite.
But they all couldn't be infinite. That's what the problem was.
Well, they couldn't be infinite at the same time.
At the same time. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's good. I like the questions. I like the interaction. So out of this, there were shards, klipas, shells that came down into this world. And that is the source of all the death and pain and suffering and everything else in the world. Because from now on, then everything in this world is now a fermish. It's a mixture. It's entangled. The same thing happened when Chava ate of the tree. It became all good and evil became intertwined and intertangled. So that there's nothing that's 100% good, and there's nothing that's 100% bad. And sometimes it's extremely hard to figure out what is the good and what is the bad. And that situation is the situation we find ourselves in today. We find ourselves in a situation where it's very hard to clarify and to get truth, because everything is distorted. The news is distorted. Our lives are distorted. Our understandings of who we are is distorted. Everything is confusing, and everything, and all of this leads to anxiety and trouble and confusion. Because the only time you really feel 100% right is like when you're a little child. When a little child, small child, doesn't think about himself. When for example, when a child is playing, you ask the child, "Are you having fun?" And his answer will be, "Don't bother me. I'm not thinking about myself. I'm not. My mind isn't reflecting about whether I'm having fun.
Right.
I want to have fun. I'm doing fun. I'm not thinking about the fun." We all suffer. We all have troubles because we think too much about ourselves. And we think about, as we get older, we can't get that seamless quality of being like a fish in water, of everything being perfectly right. And because we're not in tune. We're not aligned with who our true selves are, because we're thinking one way and another way. And this is all part of the initial destruction, the one thing left to another of the Shvir Sakelim, the breaking of the vessels. So, with that as a background, now we can sort of understand a little bit of what this whole idea is and what's going on with the coin and what's going on with the moon. So it says in this, we sing a song Friday nights. I don't know if you've ever looked at it, called Ashes Chayil, right? Ashes Chayil. Ashes Chayil means, right? We sing this song every Friday night about the woman of valor, the woman, the Jewish woman. And one of the things that it says is, V'yakam ba'od laila, she gets up in the middle of the night, v'titen terev leveta, and she gives food, provisions to her house. The Tzemach Tzedek explains, and he says, this is really the secret of what's going on in this world, and what's going on with us. The secret is as follows. Night is symbolic of there's no light, there's no energy. Everything is it looks dark. It looks, everything is wrong. There's the spiritual darkness, there's the emotional darkness, there's darkness that we just don't understand why this is happening to us. The Ashes Chayil, the Jewish woman, also referring to the Shekhinah, God's dwelling down, coming down into this world, goes into battle in order to be able to deal with this darkness. You see, there's when you want to.
It's in the battle. Can you repeat that?
I'll explain it. Yes, I'll explain it. I'll explain, and by going forward into it. So, for example, you cannot save a person from a distance. You can't give people advice. You can't help them with their traumas. You can't give them help with their problems. If you just talk from a distance, if you're disconnected and you're just giving them information and facts, that doesn't work. It doesn't help another person, because that person, if you could just like a lifeguard, you can't just tell the person, hey, you're drowning, get out of the water. You got to get in yourself. You got to get into it. You can't run a company on a joystick. You've got to get involved in the thing. You yourself have to enmesh yourself inside of what's going on. And that is the only way that you can really deal with people's psychological issues, emotional issues, and other things. You have to, in effect, wear their clothes. There's a story about the fourth Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe Marash. He used to have people come in at night for advice, one-to-one, and his gabbai, the guy who was taking care of the people coming in and out, would have to go in every once in a while and give the Rebbe a new fair plus of clothes. Because why? He was sweating so much. And he said, I don't understand why he's sweating so much. It's not so hot in the room. And every few people have to bring in a whole set of clothes. So he was a little chutzpahdik. He asked the Rebbe Marash what was going on. And the Rebbe Marash explained to him, and this is a very interesting lesson. He said, listen, when somebody comes to me and has problems, I can't just sit here intellectually and give them the answers. I have to put on his clothes. What I mean by his clothes is psychologically, I have to get dressed up in the way he looks at the world and see how he understands it and be able to explain it to him. But then when I have to give the answer, I can't be him, because then I'm entangled and meshed up just as much myself. That's the problem. So I have to go and put my own clothes on again. And so for each person, I'm taking off my clothes and putting on my clothes. Now, this is not physical clothes, so to say. It's psychological clothes. But that's what he was explaining, was it's a lot of work for each single person. And afterwards, he fired this guy. He probably found another job for him and so forth. He said, because if you can't empathize with the people coming in, you can't greet them, you can't bring them in. This is what needs to happen. In order to deal with the darkness, to deal with the problems, to deal with the issues of this world, not only we as human beings who have to help another person, do him therapy or something, but God himself has to also shrink himself, confine himself, and bring himself down and enmesh himself within this world in order to be able to help. And that is what it means that the moon shrunk. The moon didn't shrink because as a punishment. The moon shrunk so that there would be a glow of godliness in this world to help us get out of our problems. And therefore, it had to shrink. It had to confine itself. It had to contract itself into the framework of this world, and in effect suffer, because when you go down into this world, there's a lot of suffering, and there's a lot of pain, and there's a lot of disappointments, and there's a lot of anxiety, and yeah, and so you got to experience it yourself. And that is what the Ashes Chayil, the women of valor, does. She goes, she chose her soul chose, not directly, but somehow higher up chose, said, listen, this world has a lot of schmutz in it. And you come down into this world, and you know what? You're going to go through a lot of difficulty. But you know who's really fixing this world? Who's really the person of valor? Who's really the one who's solving the world's problems? That's soul. That soul, that part of ourselves, the one who goes through all these difficulties, the people who sit above and beyond and don't have any of these issues, they really haven't entered into this world. And therefore, they're not really actually taking part in the grand mission of actually refining this world. So what the Tzemach Tzedek says is, it says, yeah, it's a lot of pain. There's a lot of difficulty, and there's a lot of screaming, and there's a lot of yelling, and there's a lot of difficulty. It's not simple. It's not hard. It's not a little thing. Yeah, it isn't. But knowing that this is what we're here for already is half the problem. And not only that, it also tells us a second thing, and that is that these forces of negativity and difficulty and so forth, they really don't have any power themselves. Let me explain. The last 2 years, we went through this thing called COVID. It was a virus. Now, what's a virus? A virus isn't alive. A virus has no power itself. A virus is dead, and it has no power itself. You know what it does? Well, it tricks the body into replicating itself. It finds one cell that's susceptible, and it says and it uses the cell's energy and the cell's power to reproduce itself. And then another cell gets attacked, and another one, and another one, and another one, until it finally comes into something. This also is the same thing psychologically that happens to people. People are sensitive. People are hurt when they're a little young. They get some sort of abuse or trauma or scared or something of that sort and so forth. And you know what? A little bit of virus gets into them. And that virus is basically dead. But it uses that to reproduce, to suck your energy and your life force and your enthusiasm, and starts making itself the real thing, saying, I'm a loser, I'm a failure. And the virus is inside of us. And it's constantly, and it used our energy to do it. Once you realize that there's no reality to this negative thing, it doesn't have any reality. It's dead. That's what happens to Klipa. Once you are able to clarify, all healing comes from clarifying, from defining and understanding what the source is. You are godliness. You are holiness. You have divine energy. God is infinite. But the negative things have captured you and turned you and made you think that this is who you really are. Now that is the entanglement in the mess of the world. That's the psychological mess, and that's the physical mess that we're into. But knowing that this is the situation is already part of the healing, because once you're aware of this, now you can start realizing, you know what? I am somebody who can really do something. And these voices in me, they really are just hijacking my energy into negative places, to think that it's bad, I can't do, and it's impossible, and I'm not supposed to have a good life. And all those voices, we think they are us. Just like the virus, we think the virus is who we are because it took our energy away, and it says that's who you really are. Well, it's not. It's just a virus, and it's a virus sucking our energies into trying to become something. So knowing this is already part of the cure. And that is why the Ashes Chayil and the moon, they come down into this world. They come here and they say, listen, it's a battle. It's a war. Know that this is a war. It says Ashes Chayil. She's a warrior. This is going to be a battle. It's not going to be simple. It's not simple, but you know what? It's where the front lines are. And not only that, but we can win it, because because the forces that are saying no, bad, ain't happening and so forth, those are all voices of negativity, And they've just been taking away all our energy and all our excitement and all our enthusiasm could be using for very good things, and instead making us angry and upset and a nervous wreck and all these other kinds of stuff. And that energy could be used for good stuff, but it was hijacked by the virus. The virus turned it into negative energies spewing out all over the place. Well, you gotta realize that the only thing that keeps the virus alive is us, and that's not simple. That's not simple to get stopped, but it is what it is. It is the truth, and that is the core of the lesson of what I'm talking about. And then the last part of the mimer goes on, and it says, "Oh, and by the way, if you have to get into a battle, there are different kinds of techniques for actually winning the battle." One of the things that happens in wars, and war is the physical war is just a mirror of what means in the psychological war. In physical wars, one of the best techniques that people used to do to win wars is they used to trick the enemy. How did they trick the enemy? They would pretend that they would send out a group of people who would pretend to lose, and they would lose, and the enemy would say, "Wow, I can get good things from this. I can get," and he starts throwing in all his energy and all his forces into that thing. And you know what? It was all a trick to get him into a location where you could actually then conquer him. So that's the same thing with us. That's the same thing with us. He says that sometimes we're sent down into this world, but it's all a trick. It's all a trick that our sense of our failures and our losses and so forth. It's a trick in order that we should actually wake up, find the truth, and to be able to take the energy away, because once the energy is taken out of him, his sails, he's got nothing there. He dies. And he fights. He will use every argument in the world to try and tell you that this is not true. He'll use Torah arguments. He'll use halacha arguments. He'll use psychologically. He'll use chassidus. He'll use everything. He'll use everything to try and convince ourselves that, you know what, we're losers, because you know what, he's fighting for his life, this Lipa, this enemy. So you got to do is you have to say, listen, very nice. And you know what? And sometimes he'll try and win, and he'll give you some nice, you do a nice Aveira, and he'll give you some bennies because you have to pay people and stuff like that. Don't listen to him. It's not going to last. Those little bennies, those little flavors, those nice feelings of release and so forth are not good. So you have to realize, you know what? I'm now on your case. I know when you do this. I notice you when you're trying to use me and my energies and my talents and my excitement and my enthusiasm for life, for just being angry and upset and doing bad things and so forth. And you know what? I'm not letting you do that anymore. And if the Baal Shem Tov says that sometimes the whole reason that a soul comes down in this world is just to fight one little battle. So sometimes some of us that's our whole mission in life, just to fight that one battle and to win that one battle. So he'll say, you know what? You can daven, you can do all this other kinds of stuff, because he knows that you're going to fail when I push that one little hot button on you. So you know what? That you can't let that one hot button get a hold of you. Yep. Go ahead.
Questions? I'm sorry. First of all, two simple questions. One is, I didn't know that in Ashes Chayil, it's talking about that the woman wakes up in the middle of the night. That's so maybe it's right. So I don't say it. So I don't write.
But you sit at other people's tables. You must hear somebody sing it, no?
Unfortunately, Friday nights I'm spending by myself all the time. But I forgot. Right. So what is it that she's up in the middle of the night? Okay. The last question is the real question of, I'm trying to imagine what this has to do with the Kohen, with he has a mum, if he has a.
Good, we brought it back. You kept track. So yes, so the
right, I was following.
Has the moon. Yes, I like that. So the Kohen who has the moon, mum. So that's the same thing, is and so forth. He says, you know what? It feels like I'm somehow blemished. I'm diminished, just like the moon is diminished and blemished. And he's saying, you know what? It's not fair, and I should be a light like everything else. And the answer is that in order to deal with the darkness of this world, like I said, you can't be a lifeguard sitting on the side. You got to go down into the world. When you go down into the world, when you get involved in the water, it's dangerous. And you know what? It can be difficult, and it can be dangerous, and it can be hard, and you can get hurt, and so forth. And it is difficult. But that mum is that blemish, that lack is not a lack in his core being. And I'm sorry, I've left that part out. The moon, we can learn also same thing from the moon. The moon, when it's bright and 100% light, you know what we're seeing? You know, it's on the sun is on the other side of the moon. But the moon never really becomes diminished. When it turns to get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, then it's really facing the sun and getting a tremendous amount of light. What does that mean? It means that the diminishment is only in the external part of the moon, but it never is fundamentally lacking in light. The same thing with our lives. The soul cannot be hurt. It cannot be darkened. It cannot be blemished. Whatever blemish that is in the coin, whatever blemish it is in our lives psychologically, whatever blemish that's going on with us, is only the external part of ourselves which had to come down, which is enmeshed in the physical world. But the soul is rooted also in godliness above, and it is infinite and unlimited and has unlimited powers and energies. And it's only when we use those energies to feed the negativity within the world that the negative powers actually exist. But once we take that energy back from it, it's like the virus without the life in it. It's like the COVID without all the excitement and enthusiasm about it and so forth. It just disappears. It's just not reality. It just doesn't be life itself anymore.
It was a very deep, complicated one. No, I was following it.
Oh, so I'm just going to bring it over. I'll make it simpler. Okay, good. Because I have to run off to Mincha. But,
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, School Shimon.
Thank you so much.
Am I recording?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're
Okay.
recording. Okay. So anyway, I'm just going to give one. I'm not going to go. I'm not going to talk long. I'm just going to give one example, one real life example from my life. So, what?
I said, oh no, you're making it short because so many people are on here.
No. Okay. So this. I just want to. Because anyway, we want to keep the classes short. So, first, I'm going to start out with what I usually say. Number one, we're living in an extraordinary time. What do I mean by that? I mean that the Lubavitcher Rebbe told us in 1992 that the era of the redemption is unfolding now, despite any appearances to the contrary. And number two, our souls were picked to be in this incredible time period. Number three, we were given all the tools that we need to navigate this time. We were given our soul. We were given the Torah, which is our guidebook, and we were given the mitzvahs, which are our power tools. And number four, what we're doing tonight, learning about the process of redemption, actually speeds it up more than anything else in the world. That's what the Rebbe said. Learning about the redemption is what speeds it up. So anyway, I want to bring a practical example from, I don't know if I want something from my life that sort of relates to what Haskell Shimon was saying. So we all carry around this negativity, this stuff. And most of the time, many times, we're aware of the negativities that we carry, but sometimes there's negativity that you don't even know you're carrying. And it needs to be healed. It needs to be brought out in the open. And when it's brought out in the open, it's going to become a source of strength for you. So, I'm a child.
Why? But it's a source of strength because you try to conquer it and.
Pardon?
I said it becomes a source of strength, even though it's a negative thing, because you try to overcome it and conquer it, and it makes you stronger from being able to do that.
No. You'll listen to my particular example. So it's a good guess that you're doing. So anyway, for example, I'm a child of Holocaust survivors, and I never understood. And I was brought up. My mother lit Shabbos candles, but by and large, we were secular Jews, and I grew up in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, where there wasn't a very large Jewish population. And I didn't know it, but somehow being brought up in America, I naturally picked up from the environment sort of an embarrassment about being Jewish. Not that I would ever have known it. I wasn't conscious of such a thing at all. We went to Hebrew school and and I didn't have a lot of anti-Semitism in my childhood. I encountered a little bit, but not a lot, a very little bit. But even so, it soaks into a person's being in America. It soaks into your being without your even knowing it. So I remember when I went off to college, I went to Williams College in Massachusetts, which was an extremely waspy, extremely waspy place. And I remember if I would say, my parents are from Europe, right? I remember if I would be in public, if I would be somewhere among people in college and I said oi, I quickly look around to see if who saw that I said oi. And but I wasn't aware of feeling anything negative about being Jewish. Not until I went to Israel many times, and I started. Maybe had I started, I think I had taken my first Torah classes, and then I went walking in the Arab market, and an Arab looked at me, and he said, "You're Jewish, aren't you?" And I turned and I said, "Yes, I am." And when I said that, "Yes, I am," it was like the first time in my life that I was truly proud of being Jewish. I would have told you I was proud before, that I was not proud, I was fine with it. It's just normal. You're Irish, I'm Jewish. But being raised in this culture, you automatically imbibe a little bit of embarrassment and negativity about being Jewish. So that was something that I was probably at that point I was at least 21, and how old was I when I was in Israel and I went to yeshiva? Maybe 23, something like that. And I didn't even know that it had negatively, the fact that I'm a Jew was something that I was a little bit embarrassed about. It was something that was a little bit, I had to carry it around with me like, oh. But when it was when it was brought to the surface, it became the biggest strength of my life. There's nothing I'm more thrilled about than being a Jew. And there's nothing the world has that can compare to it. There's nothing in the world that can compare to being Jewish. There's no richness, there's no fun, there's no vacation, there's no nothing. There is no treasure better than being Jewish. So something that had been a mum in my experience, a defect, a not that I would have told you it was a defect. And I once told this to some other secular Jews, and they insisted, no, we're very proud, but it's totally not true. They hide this, they hide that. So it's something that
Right,
we
like I remember like Christmas Day, like you knew everybody else was doing stuff and our
Yeah.
family sort of just, I don't know, I guess my father was off from work and my mother and we were off from school and it was like you knew everybody was celebrating Christmas and we were just like we're off today, like what, and then maybe we went out to a Chinese restaurant because I don't know, right, it was the same thing, but we knew that like everybody else was doing this other supposedly fantastic holiday.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
So anyway, there was something that was inside me. I didn't even know that it was a weight on me. I was totally unconscious of it until it fell off me. And once that weight fell off me, it released such an incredible thing. It released like my pride in being Jewish. I'm so proud of being Jewish. I'm so grateful. Pride is, I don't know if it's proud. Uh, I'm grateful. I'm just grateful to Hashem.
Lois Sani Goy, right.
Yeah, I'm so grateful. So anyway, it's very interesting. I spoke about it a little bit last week, but last week's class nobody's going to see because we didn't send it out in time. And it was Lag BaOmer. We went for Lag BaOmer to Crown Heights, and and uh, and when the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, he came to America in 1940, and even before then he had visited America in something like 1929. And when he wrote back, his Rebbitzin was still in Europe, and he wrote back to his Rebbitzin and he said, "This is a very strange country, America." It's a very, very, very strange country. It's all about the biggest nature of America is showing off. If you have something, you have to tell everybody about it. You have to advertise it. It's a very different culture. And he said Mendel, referring to Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who was his son-in-law, he said, I bet Mendel could do interesting things here with his education and his background. Anyway, when the Rebbe came over a year later in 1941, he was 39 years old. And he was 39 years old. And he came in June, and by Rosh Hashanah, by Tashlich, he agreed with his father-in-law completely about what America was all about, and he figured out the cure for America. And he said, America is all about showing off. It's all about, I have this, I ate this for dinner, I went to this restaurant, whatever. He said, you know what we have to do? We have to show off how proud we are that we are Jews. And so for Tashlich, he was the Rebbe's son-in-law. If he says something, people listen. And he said, we're not going to just go to Tashlich. We're going to march. And he said, Zwei by Zwei und singen and niggin. We're going to march the mile or whatever to Prospect Park and whatever it was that they would go to, whatever park it was, and where there was water. And he made these grown men, some of them very old, he made them march 2 by 2, singing Nigunim. And they were so, like, they wanted the earth to open up and for them to fall in, because in the 1940s, you did not display your Judaism whatsoever. You wore your yarmulke carefully tucked underneath a cap or a hat. You did not wear your tzitzis out. You did not advertise in any way that you were a Jew. And
even in Brooklyn, I guess
so. It was the heart of, there were so many Jews, but nobody did it. And he said the cure for America is to start to show off our pride in being Jewish. And I'll finish the story. There was one guy who was a young guy. He's since then, it's a long time ago, he passed away. He became a famous rabbi in his own right, Rabbi Zalman Posner, and brilliant man. And he was young then, and he was so mortified. He said, I can't do this. I'm not making a parade 2 by 2 singing Nigunim. I'm not doing it. Walking down Eastern Parkway, the richest street in Brooklyn, the richest street in probably in a large area. It was very, very, very affluent. He said, I'm not doing it. I can't do this. And one of the older rabbis came up to him and said, I'm old. I can't walk as fast as everybody else. Young man, would you mind if you walked slowly with me and you were my companion? And the Zalman Posner said, whoa, I'm so lucky. I'm out of that parade. So they went a long way behind the main parade. And then on the way back, the Rebbe made sure to take a different road so more people could see the parade. And Zalman Posner was safely far behind. And then this guy, this long-haired Jew, came up to him and takes him by the collar and says to Zalman Posner, he says, what's this? What is that just went by? What are they doing? And Zalman Posner's thinking, oh, yeah, I didn't get out of it. I have to give some kind of an answer. And so he was about to give an answer, but the long-haired Jew, he was a Jew, he didn't let Zalman Posner speak. He gave the answer. He said, I'll tell you what they're doing. He said, inside every Jew, a small fire is burning. And they are trying to fan it into a big flame of a small fire of love of God or whatever. And they're trying to fan it into a big flame. And that's exactly that's exactly what the Rebbe was doing. And that's why the Rebbe always advocates, like, he used satellite hookups and parades. The whole Lag BaOmer parade is the Rebbe's invention. And anyway, so we have to, just like the sickness it still exists. The sickness of America is a very subtle, so subtle that people don't even know they carry this burden. It's a very subtle embarrassment about being Jewish. And the cure for it is exactly what the Rebbe said, to go public and to be super proud of being Jewish. So anyway, that's a moom that comes to the surface and becomes a strength. So I think that sort of fits in with what Yaskel Shimon was saying. Meantime, I'm gonna turn off the recording and wait, I'm gonna turn off the recording